Oh, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you're watching this. I do hope it finds you well. My name is John, and I am an author, and I'm coming to you here on my latest Talking Tuesday video to talk a little bit more in depth on one of my favorite books, which is The Hobbit by J.R.R. Tolkien. Um, this is a book that, well, I say I first read, was first read to me by my father when I was probably 3 or 4. No, probably 4 or 5. I'm not 100% sure. I feel like I was about 4 though. At 36, that was a long time ago, so the memories are not 100% clear. And I just remember just being fascinated by the look of the book. I mean, my copy I love that has one of Tolkien's original, his own design for the cover. I think this is for the 70th anniversary. I got this, um, but he has like sort of a green hardcover and like a case that's just really beautiful to look at. And I was fascinated as well both by the story and by Tolkien's own drawings, which I love to just look at, experience. Um, and this is one of the first. This is probably as the same result one of the first books that I properly read as a read through myself. That was like a proper like chapter book. Couldn't tell you how old I was when I did this. You know, one of my favorite illustrations. I couldn't tell you what age I was when I did that, or how many times I've read it since then, because I've read um, The Hobbit a lot of times. It's in my personal opinion one of the very best examples of sort of all ages literature that I can think of, and really proof that something that is suitable for children, because there's really nothing in here. There's some action and excitement, but there's really nothing in here that's not appropriate or wouldn't be good for children. But also is perfectly enjoyable by adults as well. And really just that combination uh, I really like. It's also one of the ways that it's, I think, very accessible to for younger audiences to read or have read to them, is the fact that it's very episodic. Like, obviously there's the through narrative of the quest for Erebor and to steal from the dragon / reclaim the dwarves' homeland. Um, is sort of a through line, but each chapter is very episodic, and it's very easy to read on its own as a mini little adventure. I mean, you've got the dwarves showing up at Bag End and meeting Bilbo in the opening, and then you have the adventure with the trolls, and then they go to Rivendell, and then you know, it's the mountain pass, and then it's in the mountains, and then you have Bilbo meeting Gollum, and just the um, very neat segments of the narration are very easy to to digest, to read on its own. Um, I mean, some of the characters are. I mean, Bilbo's a great character. Gandalf, Thorin are all great characters. Beorn, Smaug, also very interesting characters. It's a very interesting setup. Um, some of the like songs and tales that are recorded, the poetry that Tolkien included, are really fantastic, and just really really beautiful, and it's a really, it's a really neat setup. Um, I'd say, for criticism, I'd say I've always felt that some of the chapters and some of the incidents are more interesting than others. Like there's some, some sequences, the party sneaking in, talking to the dragon, the battle of five armies, are all, meeting Beorn, so that are really, really interesting. Others are, just not as interesting or not as engaging. So there's a couple points in the story that I think it drags a little bit. But again, the fact that it's, a fairly short book and the way it's broken into chapters, it makes it very easy to sort of just, move on and get to the next thing. Of course, reading as a modern audience, it's, I didn't notice until I'll fully admit I didn't notice until it was pointed out to me, and then it becomes very obvious that there are no, at least named, female characters that appear in the story or that have speaking lines. I think there's one or two unnamed characters that are referenced as speaking, I think, in Lake Town, but other than that, it's, everyone speaking, everyone engaging. Certainly, everyone named is, a male. That's it's a little jarring to read, and to Tolkien's credit, it's something he realized or recognized towards the end of his life, that his there was definitely a shortage of female characters in his books, and a lot of the editing in the last, I think, decade or so of his life was remedying that. So a lot of the Silmarillion, the Unfinished Tales, stuff like that feature women in a much more prominent role, but just, that never made its way through The Hobbit, which is published in the 1930s. Um, yeah, that's a good. But overall, I think the work has a few problems, a few slow places. I think it's a good. I think it's pretty effectively stood the test of time, and has some really great moments to it. So I certainly would encourage anyone who's interested in fantasy to check it out. It's a great opening point and is sort of one of the very much foundation stones of the genre. Um, in terms of the Peter Jackson's adaptation of it, I feel that's one where I think there's a good. I think there's some really, really good parts to, the adaptation, and there's some parts that just drag and aren't as effective. Um, like some things I think are work. At least in a few places, the incorporation of like some of the songs and stuff like that, particularly um, the far over misty mountains cold from the first, one are is really just eerie and eerily beautiful. Um, the cast is great. It's well cast. I like that it gives more personality to some of the dwarves, even if some of them end up just sort of being, one note and stereotypical. There's at least more character to them. Um, Honestly, I don't mind too much that they included some of the material that's in the Unfinished Tales. which very much puts the Hobbit into the context of the wider Middle Earth. Um, those familiar, when the Hobbit was originally written, or when Tolkien originally wrote it, he was kind of writing it to see if he could write a full out prose story, and he never intended it to be part of his wider Middle Earth legendarium, other than a few sort of passing oblique references that I think he put in just to amuse himself more than anything. And it was only when he was talked into writing the sequel, Lord of the Rings, that he really turned it into sort of that last chapter of um, the sort of age of legend or magic or whatever you want to call it. I'll talk about that more next week when I'm going over Lord of the Rings. But it's really, really well done. Um, and so, and then he went back and edited it to make it more part of, his Middle Earth. So it was never like, there's nothing really, even after his edits, there's nothing really super in The Hobbit that sets up Lord of the Rings or the greater story of the Third Age and the reemergence of Sauron. So I would really encourage. So I don't mind bringing some of that stuff in. As I mentioned, due to the absence of female characters, I don't mind them bringing in Galadriel, the character of Tauriel, you know some greater role of some of the characters in Lake Town. They probably could have gone a little further and featured and added a few more here or there. While the CGI is certainly a little bit, I much prefer the practical effects and practical makeup of Lord of the Rings. I've come up with, I guess you could call it a headcanon of why the CGI is so much like bigger and louder and more colorful in the Hobbit trilogy. It's because the Hobbit trilogy movies are really shown in as being sort of when Bilbo's writing his story or his book there and back again. Um, and it shows him writing it much later. So basically, he's writing it 60 years later. So you have a 60-year gap of which he's remembering things. Bilbo certainly has his own storytelling flair that he's exaggerating things. And a lot of the more outlandish effects and action and stuff like that just seems almost cartoonish. Bilbo wasn't even there for, so clearly, like he's been told that by the dwarves, who probably are also embellishing it. So you've got several layers of embellishment. So it kind of makes sense that the orcs are like bigger and tougher and more whatever you want to call it. Um, yeah. Other than that, like I said, some sequences are in terms of some things that don't work. Some sequences are just like rather overextended, sort of out of the blue. Um, there's just a lot added to it. They probably could have paired. They probably could have still achieved what they were aiming for in terms of you know really making it more of a prequel to Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Um, but they probably could have done that in like two, but could have done that in two movies and kept things a little clearer. Um, I've always had an issue with the Battle of Five Armies, as in the actual battle itself. Some of the scenes surrounding it are really good, but the battle itself, I've always thought was rather like poorly edited and confusing. I mean, yes, battles are naturally, chaotic and confusing, but like I think they could have done a little bit more to help understand or capture what was actually going on. So, There's things I don't like about it. Just like with Lord of the Rings, I would heartily recommend watching the extended editions. Overall, they add some stuff to the story, add some features that are overall better. Um, yeah, that's just my thoughts on the Hobbits. One of my favorite books. I really encourage you, if you've never read it, to check it out. I would also encourage everyone to check out my books, The Shadow of the Past and In the Sunburned Red. They are linked below. I would also love for you to like, share, and subscribe, and I'd love to hear your comments as well. What are your thoughts on The Hobbit? What are your thoughts on, the adaptions? What works for you in the book? What doesn't work for you in the book? I'd love to hear all of that. But in the meantime, I do hope you all have fantastic days, that you get a chance to do or experience something creative, and I'll catch you on the next one.